He was born a privileged young master, raised in wealth and comfort, yet he dreamed of living like a wandering knight riding across the land with nothing but a horse and a gun. From the bustling cities of the East, he planned to travel thousands of miles to the desolate wilderness of the West. He wasn't seeking adventure or hardship, he was chasing love. Jay and Rose had known each other since childhood, growing up as inseparable companions. But while Jay came from a wealthy family, Rose was merely the daughter of one of their servants. Their love was something society would never accept, nor would either of their families ever approve, so they could only maintain their secret relationship in silence, meeting in hidden corners away from judging eyes. But one day, as they met in secret again, Rose's father suddenly walked in, panicking. Jay quickly crawled under the bed to hide. He thought he would only have to wait a few minutes, but soon, the house filled with her father's friends. They were drinking, laughing, and talking loudly, with no sign of leaving anytime soon. Jay could only lie still under the bed, silently watching, quietly listening. Then, someone placed a cat beside the bed. Jay, who had always been terrified of cats, felt his heart leap in panic. He instinctively shrank backward, and in that moment, made a sound. The noise gave him away, and within seconds, he was discovered hiding under the bed. Both families were quickly called together for a tense confrontation. 7 years earlier, Jay's parents had died in an accident, leaving his uncle as his guardian. His uncle strongly opposed Jay's relationship with Rose, believing that someone of her status was unworthy of their family. But Jay refused to back down, declaring that he would marry Rose no matter what. Furious, his uncle slapped Rose hard across the face right in front of him. Seeing his daughter humiliated, Rose's father lost control. In a fit of rage, he shoved Jay's uncle with all his strength. The man fell backward, hitting his head on a sharp stone, and died instantly. Jay froze in shock, completely overwhelmed by fear, and fled in panic. That same night, Rose's father took his daughter and escaped westward, hoping to hide in the vast, uninhabited lands. A few days later, when Jay finally calmed down, he made up his mind to find Rose in the West. No matter what awaited him, he wanted to be with her, and so began his journey, a long, 1,000-kilometer trek across the country. Along the way, he saw countless displaced Native Americans, victims of the federal government's westward expansion. Kind-hearted Jay felt deep sorrow, but he knew there was nothing he could do. All he could do was watch in silence, a powerless bystander in a world beyond his control. This young master, who had never before left his comfortable home, soon became disheveled and weary. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, he suddenly heard the sharp crack of gunfire. He loosened his reins, moving forward cautiously, his every sense alert to the danger that might be waiting ahead, while the sound of gunshots echoed through the woods. Soon, Jay saw a Native American man running toward him at full speed. Panicked, Jay forgot all about the pistol in his pocket. Instead, he raised his hands in front of him, bracing for whatever might happen. When the man saw Jay standing there, he too stopped abruptly. The two of them stared at each other, tense and cautious, neither daring to move. Just then, a gunshot rang out from behind. The Native American immediately turned and bolted into the trees. And moments later, 3 armed men appeared in front of Jay. Jay quickly raised his hands again, stammering that he was white, not a native, and that he didn't even know the man they were chasing. The leader ordered his 2 companions to continue the pursuit, staying behind himself to rob Jay of his belongings. But as he stepped forward, a pistol was suddenly pressed against his head. Jay froze. His rescuer was a masked ranger. The ranger swiftly disarmed the man and was about to shoot him, but the inexperienced Jay thought the masked stranger was the real threat. Terrified, he pointed his own gun at the ranger and shouted for him to let the man go. The ranger didn't say a word. He calmly walked up to Jay, snatched the gun from his trembling hands, and aimed it at the man. But when he pulled the trigger, the gun clicked empty. The man smirked in relief. But that moment of hope didn't last long. The ranger handed the empty pistol back to Jay, then bent down and cut the dead man's money pouch from his belt, slipping it into his own pocket before continuing to search the body for anything of value. Jay watched in shock and disgust, realizing what kind of man the savior really was. The ranger could tell right away that Jay was a pampered rich boy. He warned Jay that the West was full of danger and offered, for a price, to escort him safely to his destination. But Jay refused. He saw the ranger as nothing more than a thief and murderer, not someone he could trust, much less travel with. Still, desperate to reach Rose, Jay finally agreed to pay half the fee up front, and together they began their long journey westward. Soon after leaving the forest, they encountered 3 black men singing cheerfully by the roadside. The ranger paid them no attention and kept walking, but naive, Soft-hearted Jay stopped to listen, moved by the sound and the simple warmth of human kindness. He believed the world was full of love, that goodness and justice existed everywhere, while the ranger believed the world was cruel and unpredictable. Jay thought the ranger was cold and heartless, while the ranger thought Jay was so innocent that he belonged in a fairy tale. Yet, somehow, these two men from completely different worlds began to understand each other. Over the days that followed, they slowly grew into friends. Jay shared the story of his forbidden love with Rose, and the ranger told him strange and fascinating tales from his travels across the frontier. Everything seemed to be getting better until the day they came across a small roadside store. Eager to restock on supplies, they hurried inside. The store owner, claiming it was for safety, temporarily took the ranger's gun before letting them browse. Jay wandered in and immediately spotted a fine-looking suit. Excited, he took it into the fitting room to try it on. At that moment, a married couple entered the store. The man pretended to shop while, behind the owner's back, the woman slipped small items into her bag, but her theft didn't go unnoticed. The owner caught her red-handed. Seeing his wife exposed, the husband panicked and pulled a gun, while the shopkeeper slowly stepped back in alarm. The man pleaded desperately, saying he was driven by poverty and only wanted a little money to survive, but the owner refused, reminding him that this was the middle of nowhere, the only store for miles around, and even if he stole money, there'd be nowhere to spend it. The man insisted, and when the owner still refused, he struck him hard with the butt of his gun. The shopkeeper fell, then suddenly pulled out a weapon of his own and fired. The man dropped dead instantly. In shock, the wife screamed and fired back, killing the owner. All of this unfolded right before the ranger's eyes. He wanted to intervene, but he couldn't. His gun had been confiscated when he entered, so he stayed crouched in the corner, helplessly watching the tragedy play out. Shaking, the woman rushed to her husband's body, and that's when she spotted the ranger. He raised his hands quickly, explaining that he was just a traveler passing through, but the woman, who had just taken a life for the first time, was trembling with panic and fear. She was terrified that he would report her to the law. Yet deep down, her conscience screamed at her not to harm an innocent man. Torn between guilt and fear, she didn't know whether to pull the trigger again. The ranger spoke softly, trying to calm her down, but her emotions were spiraling out of control. In that moment of crisis, Jay, who had been in the fitting room trying on a suit, grabbed the pistol lying on the chair. He stepped out slowly, his hands trembling, and stood behind the woman. After a long hesitation, he finally pulled the trigger. It was the first time Jay had ever taken a life. As the woman fell to the ground, Jay froze, staring at her lifeless body. A wave of guilt and confusion overwhelmed him. He didn't know if what he'd done was right or wrong, and deep inside, regret began to claw at his heart. The ranger, long accustomed to the blood and chaos of the West, didn't say a word. He stood up, pulled Jay to his feet, and began collecting supplies from the store. When Jay stepped outside, his arms full of provisions, he froze in horror. Two small children were standing by the doorway, holding hands, staring blankly at him. They were the children of the couple who had just been killed. Even the hardened ranger was shaken by the sight. Jay's heart shattered. He realized he had just taken the life of their mother. His guilt crushed him like a mountain. Without saying a word, he placed all the supplies on the ground for the children, then walked away like a man already dead inside, following the ranger into the vast emptiness. On the road, Jay said nothing, lost in remorse, while the ranger whistled as if nothing had happened. But inside, the ranger was not as calm as he seemed. Years of wandering had taught him to bury his anger and sorrow deep within. He clenched his fists silently, hiding his emotions behind that indifferent whistle. Jay, unaware of the turmoil behind him, finally broke the silence and asked a question.
We could have taken them in.
And where?
The ranger's brief answer left him speechless once again. That night, Jay couldn't sleep. As dawn approached, he quietly packed his things and decided to leave. He no longer wanted to travel with someone he believed to be heartless and cold. And so, he set out alone, continuing his long journey west. Before long, Jay met another man on the open plains. Unlike the stoic ranger, this stranger was talkative and friendly, with a warm smile that immediately put Jay at ease. He offered Jay food and coffee and introduced himself as a writer documenting the lives and landscapes of the western frontier. Feeling comforted, Jay opened up and shared his story in return. They talked happily late into the night, and for the first time in days, Jay felt he had found a true companion for his journey. But when he woke the next morning, his heart dropped. His horse, luggage, and supplies were all gone. The wind howled through the empty plain. There was nothing left but an egg and a folded note. Clutching the egg in his hand, he opened the note and stared at the message. disbelief turning to anger. He couldn't accept that the man who had seemed so kind and genuine had stolen everything from him. Furious, he threw the note into the wind. The barren wasteland echoed with emptiness. And now, Jay had nothing left but a single egg. He cracked it open with a rock and discovered it wasn't even cooked. He stared at the raw yolk dripping onto the dirt, his eyes blank, his heart hollow. In that moment, he finally understood what the ranger had once told him. The world is full of deceit, and people's hearts are unpredictable. Regret washed over him. He wished he had never left the ranger, but it was too late. He had no choice but to wander the wilderness alone, with no food, no water, and no direction. He trudged onward, his strength fading. At last, he spotted some wild mushrooms, but lacking survival experience, he hesitated, unsure whether they were safe to eat. Just then, he sensed someone approaching from behind. He spun around and there was the ranger, sitting tall on his horse, watching him silently. Though Jay had abandoned him, the ranger hadn't abandoned Jay. He had tracked him down and even brought back the stolen horse and luggage. Jay still didn't like the ranger's cold, wordless manner, but deeply moved. He opened his wallet, took out all his money, and handed it to him. He only asked that the ranger escort him safely to his destination. For the first time, Jay realized how impossible it was to survive this journey alone. Only with the ranger's help could he hope to reach Rose again. And so, the two of them set off once more, heading west together. Along the way, the ranger took care of Jay, protecting him, feeding him, and even helping him like a watchful guardian. Jay believed he had finally found a true friend, but what he didn't know was that the ranger had his own secret plan. Jay's lover, Rose, was a wanted fugitive, and long before their journey together, the ranger had already seen her face on a wanted poster, dead or alive. The bounty was $2,000, an enormous sum in those days. The real reason the ranger had agreed to travel with Jay was to use him to find Rose, then claim the reward for himself. Just as he had once told Jay, the world is dangerous, and people's hearts can't be trusted. But Jay had no idea about the ranger's secret plan. Naive and kind-hearted, he treated the ranger as a true friend, constantly telling him stories about his love for Rose as they traveled together. One afternoon, while resting in the forest, Jay noticed something strange. The trees in the distance seemed to be moving. He stood still, squinting, trying to see more clearly. What he thought were moving trees were, in fact, native warriors. An arrow suddenly whistled through the air toward him. Days earlier, the ranger had stumbled upon that wanted poster, $2,000, dead or alive. He had torn it down quietly, making sure Jay didn't notice. Years of wandering had hardened him, leaving him weary of killing but desperate for a final payday enough to end his life on the road. The fugitive on that poster was none other than Rose, the woman Jay was risking everything to find. The ranger had planned to follow Jay, let him lead the way to her, and then turn her in for the bounty. But as days passed and the two faced danger after danger together, something inside the ranger began to change. Jay's kindness and innocence awakened something long dormant in his heart, a sense of humanity, of decency, of what it meant to still be a man. $2,000 on one side, a loyal friend on the other. The ranger found himself torn apart by guilt and indecision. Still, they pressed onward. Then one evening, they ran into a cigar-smoking man deep in the woods. Like the ranger, he too was hunting for the same bounty. He'd followed Jay all this way, knowing Rose was the woman everyone was after. That night, while Jay was away gathering wood, the man confronted the ranger. He revealed that he knew everything. The ranger's planned to use Jay to find Rose and offered to split the money 50-50. But the ranger, now wrestling with his own conscience, refused. When the man threatened to hurt Jay, the ranger drew his gun, forcing him to back off. The man left slowly, glaring as he disappeared into the trees. In that moment, the ranger realized something he hadn't expected. Jay meant more to him than any amount of money. And yet, the temptation still lingered. The next morning, they woke to the roar of rushing water. The river beside their camp had overflowed, flooding everything. Their supplies were soaked, their guns swept away. They scrambled to save what they could, tying a rope between their horses to hang their clothes as they continued down the trail. For the first time in years, the ranger felt something he hadn't known in a long time, the feeling of home. A small, fragile home on horseback, but still, a home. Looking at Jay's open smile, he realized the boy was no longer just a traveling companion. He had become family. But their peace didn't last. From a ridge above, the ranger spotted figures watching them, among them, the cigar-smoking man from before. At that moment, the ranger made his choice. He confessed everything to Jay. He told him about the bounty, about using him to find Rose, about the men now following them. Then he handed Jay the crumpled wanted poster. Jay stared at it, then at the ranger, disbelief written across his face. He couldn't accept that the man who had protected him all this time had been lying from the very start. But the ranger, eyes full of regret, swore he would now do everything in his power to protect Jay and Rose even if it cost him his life. For him, their friendship had become worth far more than $2,000. Knowing the bounty hunters were closing in, Jay wanted to change course, but the ranger shook his head. There would be more hunters ahead. He said their only chance was to reach Rose first and defend her together, to escape their pursuers. The ranger led Jay into the Silver Ghost Forest, a dangerous wilderness rumored to be haunted and home to several native tribes. Few dared to enter, but they had no choice. They hadn't gone far when danger struck. An arrow pierced Jay's hand clean through. He froze for 2 seconds in disbelief before panic took over. The ranger rushed to him, but before he could react, 2 natives leapt onto their horses and galloped away. Luckily, the rope Jay had strung between the horses to hang their clothes snagged the reins, stopping the thieves before they could escape with the animals. The archer dropped his bow and fled. Grimacing in pain, Jay clutched his bleeding hand and looked to the ranger for help. Without hesitation, the ranger snapped the arrow in half and pulled it straight through, then wrapped the wound tightly in bandages. They pressed on until, at last, the forest opened up and there it was, a wooden cabin standing alone in the valley. Rose's hideout. After thousands of kilometers and endless trials, Jay had finally reached her, but before he could take another step, the ranger looped a rope around his arm and tied his hands behind a tree. Jay shouted in confusion, but the ranger didn't answer. He knew the truth. Rose was wanted by half the West, and bounty hunters were everywhere. If Jay ran into that chaos, he'd be killed before he ever saw her again. The ranger mounted his horse and rode straight toward the cabin alone. His instincts were right. A bounty hunter was already hidden in the field, rifle aimed and ready. Rose's father was outside repairing the fence. He became the first to fall when the shot rang out. More bounty hunters crept closer, moving past Jay, who struggled furiously to break free. He saw them advancing on the cabin and screamed Rose's name, trying to tear the ropes against the bark. At the cabin, the ranger arrived just in time. He pounded on the door, shouting that he was Jay's friend and wanted to protect her. But wary and frightened, Rose didn't answer. She aimed her gun through the window instead. The ranger raised his hands, backing away, insisting he wasn't an enemy. Before he could say more, the hidden gunman fired again. The ranger dove for cover, but a bullet tore through his leg. He ducked behind the wall, gasping in pain, as bullets ripped through the air around him. Another bounty hunter shot the first one dead, and chaos erupted. Rose fired through the windows, taking down attacker after attacker, until her gun clicked empty. Outside, the field was ablaze. One of her allies, a native man who had long loved her in silence, had loosed a burning arrow, setting the field on fire and exposing the hidden gunman. He ran straight into the line of fire and was killed. Inside, Rose turned and saw the impossible. Jay had made it. He had broken free and rushed through the storm of bullets, bursting through the door. Startled, Rose spun and fired before realizing who it was. The shot struck Jay, and he fell to the floor behind her. He tried to speak her name, but no sound came out. He simply sat there, bleeding, staring at the woman he had crossed a continent to find. Rose turned again, saw him on the ground, and froze. Her world collapsed. She dropped her gun and crawled to his side, tears streaming down her face. Unable to speak a single word, Jay reached out, his eyes still full of love. Before they slowly closed forever, Rose clung to him, her screams lost amid the gunfire outside. The last bounty hunter burst into the room and Jay, with the final strength left in his body, pulled the trigger one last time. Then everything went silent. When the smoke cleared, Rose knelt beside Jay's lifeless body, her soul shattered. She had dreamed of this reunion for so long, never imagining it would end like this, with no time for goodbye, no chance for one last embrace. Moments later, the wounded ranger limped through the door. He looked at Jay, at Rose, and at the ruin around them, his face a mask of sorrow and guilt. Years later, Rose and the ranger built a new life together. They had a child, a boy, and named him Jay, in memory of the man who had loved her beyond all reason, and whose name she would never forget.